Good evening and welcome to our initial SIG Talk for 2025. I'm Jim Cooper, Chair for the SIG Talk program, Vice President of the New York City Area Alumni Chapter, and Assistant Grand Praetor for the Hudson Valley Province. The Washington Alumni Chapter partners with the New York Alumni Chapter in producing SIG Talks, and joining me tonight as my co-moderator is Bruce Kastner. Bruce is President Emeritus of the Washington Alumni Chapter, past Chairman of the Grand Trustees, a Ritual Master, and an Order of Constantine inductee. Tonight, I'm proud to say that our SIG Talk guest is an alumnus of my undergraduate home chapter, Alpha Chi, at the Penn State University. Rich Hume graduated in 1982 and spent 30 years of his career with the IBM Corporation in a variety of channel management and executive positions. During the final 8 years of his career, Rich was with Tech Data Corporation that later became TD-SYNNEX. You may or may not be familiar with that name, but here are a couple of facts. TD-SYNNEX is number 63 on the renowned Fortune 500 list of corporations. In 2023, their annual revenues exceeded $57 billion. Rich retired from the company this past September, where he was Chief Executive Officer. He has also been awarded the designation Significant SIG. TD-SYNNEX identifies itself as an information technology aggregator company. Rich will be explaining what that means among several other aspects of their business and key elements of his IBM career. Now, if anybody in our live audience tonight has any questions that you would like Rich to answer after Bruce and I are done with the interview, you can go to the comment section up in the top right corner of your screen and place the question, which we'll allow time for at the end of meeting with Rich. So let's get into it. Rich, welcome to SIG Talks, and thank you for joining our program.
Well, thanks, Jim, and hello, everyone. Good evening, or maybe it's middle of the afternoon for the West Coasters out there, or early evening, I should say. It's great to be here. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to be on this broadcast, and I really look forward to the discussion. And hopefully, at the end, everybody can take a little bit away from the talks.
Yeah, I think our audience is really going to enjoy it.
Great.
Rich, help us to get to know you by telling the SIG Talk audience where you are from originally and give us a brief description of your early life before college days.
I'm happy to do that. So I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, north of Scranton, in a town called Clark Summit, a very small rural town. I'm one of 6 children. We had 8 in a family with my parents. Grew up very modest. Our house was 2,300 square feet. I still scratch my head today and wonder, how did 8 of us fit into a 2,300 square foot home, actually. So my parents were just outstanding role models for myself and my brothers and sisters, and their life was committed to allowing all 6 of us to pursue higher education. And to be candid, although we might not have had a lot in the early days, we needed for nothing. And I had a great childhood and was very innovative around automobiles and, working mechanically on different things, and really sort of enjoyed that rural life for a period of time. So, that's sort of the summary as to how I grew up and the setting by which I grew up in.
It sounds like you had a really good foundation. And you enrolled at Penn State University in the College of Business Administration, where you majored in finance and accounting. How did your university studies contribute to your preparation for a career in private industry?
Interestingly, the first 2 years, you kind of have the opportunity of trying different things, and then you ultimately have to pick a major and move on. So I was very intrigued with economics. However, my dad, he knew that at the end of 4 years that I had to get on with it and find a job pretty quickly. So I had a discussion with him and said, "Hey, I really think I would like to major in economics, which is a spectacular major. I think I even want to maybe teach economics at a local university someday." But he said, "Well, let's." We were sitting and it was a Sunday, and we said, "Let's open the New York Times and see how many undergraduate economics jobs." And certainly, there was only a few. There were certainly a lot of doctorates and graduate degree economic opportunities. So then I had decided that my next in line was accounting, and decided to pursue my degree in accounting. And I say this humbly, obviously from my street corner, but I always felt as if accounting was the science of business. And that if you were to understand the financial flows of an organization, it taught you a lot about how those organizations had run and how they capitalized themselves and things of that nature. So I've always been happy to have had an accounting degree, and that's the degree I pursued at Penn State, and it served me well as I moved through my career.
Right. Well, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I know accounting is also kind of the language of business too, and if you understand it, you can go a lot of different directions from there. You also joined Sigma Chi while at Penn State. Now, what was it about the prospect of Greek life and our fraternity that attracted you to seek membership?
So I actually, when I was at Penn State, was living in an apartment with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Murray, and he was a little bit older than me, so he pursued Sigma Chi. And then once he became a brother, he had invited me out to the house, and it was an immediate excitement on my behalf, because I saw this brotherhood and this group of guys that had come together. And in my mind, I was thinking, this helps to really make this very, very large university small and perhaps more digestible. And so obviously it was the brotherhood. It was all of the guys within the brotherhood. I really enjoyed being with them. So I decided to pledge and ultimately become a brother there myself. But, I think that this whole concept of having a big university become manageable and small, and a unique set of friends to kind of go through that journey together was really, really special.
Yeah, well, having attended Penn State myself, I can appreciate what you're saying in terms of bringing you to a smaller community where you can really find yourself fitting in well and benefiting from it. So, Rich, if I understand your career track correctly, after you spent a couple of years in public accounting, you were offered a position by International Business Machines. Your tenure with IBM spanned more than 30 years. We won't have nearly enough time this evening to discuss your numerous assignments within IBM, but it would be great to hear your thoughts on how you developed an outstanding career there. How did you first get started at the company, and what was important when it came to job performance and generating opportunities for advancement?
Well, I was in public accounting at the time, and I went through a couple of tax seasons, and I thought, boy, these are really, really long hours. And also, um, from my own street corner again, I thought that my best skills were not necessarily in accounting, despite the fact that that's what I had majored in. And I was really kind of thinking about pursuing something broader or different. I had three family members that actually worked at IBM, and they seemed to be doing quite well. So I decided to apply. I applied for the financial department. They called me. They said, "We really don't have any roles there, but we'd be happy to hire you in procurement." And I thought to myself, boy, that'd be different. So maybe I'll go and try that. So I joined IBM, and what appealed to me about IBM was that it was a very large company with many different business units, and they were very focused on their people development. So I joined, and, as you said, without going through all of the specificity, my career really came in, two halves over those 32 years. The first half was within the financial function. So I had risen to become the CFO of a major business unit. At the time, it was the PC business in IBM, which was, I think was $12 billion or something like that. But even at that, I thought, boy, I really would like to do something beyond just finance and accounting, and then aspired to become a general manager, have the opportunity to run businesses. So, given that I was steeped in the PC business at IBM, they offered me the opportunity to be the general manager of PC United States. And that was the start of the second half of my career, which is generally having the opportunity to run businesses within the company. So I ran the PC business, I ran their Intel-based server business globally, had the opportunity of running the European theater in totality, and many other jobs like that along the way. As it relates to being successful, there's a couple of elements that come to mind. First is you absolutely have to be passionate and love what you do, because that provides the juice and the energy to be persistent and to be engaged and, to, contribute value to the company. The second is, an environment at scale like an IBM just offered boundless opportunities to go and try different functional areas and go and try different businesses within the company. And you learn a lot about, how to operate and run a business, but you also learn a lot about technology and IT and, how that gets applied in the world, in reality. And then, third piece is, I kind of put this under the category a little bit of luck. Had the opportunity to work for people very young in my career who became really very senior executives. So, this whole concept of, kind of targeting who are the bright and up and coming people, and then trying to align yourself with working within their areas, I believe gave me the opportunity to accelerate my career at IBM, because as they had progressed, they were always looking for people that they found had value that they wanted to bring along with them as they progressed.
So you
So it
had
was
some.
a really good flywheel for me as I came through my career at IBM.
It sounds like you had some really good mentors as you're describing it. Now, one of the final positions that you had in the company was running, if I understand it, running IBM Europe.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you were based and what the challenges were in, running a business in a environment in a country that was not your own.
Yeah, so Ginny Rometty just had become the CEO of IBM, and I'd worked for her again back to, people you work for, and as they move on to positions, they consider you for, new positions. And she had come to me and she said, Rich, I know that you turned us down in wanting to run Asia Pacific for personal reasons, but Europe is opened up. Would you consider running IBM Europe for the company? And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. So actually, the headquarters for IBM Europe is in Madrid, Spain. So I moved to Madrid, lived there for 3 years. The footprint for IBM at the time was a little over 40 countries, $35 billion in sales, and IBM had great profits. So they had a 20% operating profit margin, which was outstanding. 50,000 coworkers within Europe that I had the responsibility for, along with the business results for that operating unit. One of the greatest jobs of my career for sure. Learned so much. Challenges were really with the complexity of 40 countries, and culturally, most of them very different.
Mm.
And then, having to have a footprint that was in country, yet at the same time, you were trying to drive efficiencies within the business as well. At the time as well, IBM was coming through a major transition strategically. They got behind, and so there was a lot of transitions in terms of the resources, the offerings, etc. So that was probably the bigger challenge in that job, was dealing with all of the country complexity and the transitions to some of the new business models.
Well, for me, that's just a wow. What a big responsibility. And they must have thought very highly of you to offer you that opportunity. Bruce, I'm going to pass the baton over to you to take over the discussion with Rich.
Thank you, Jim. And Rich, it's really a real pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Bruce.
IBM underwent major transformation during your tenure there. How would you characterize the ways that the company adapted in order to survive and thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if I'm being candid and honest, the market moved. The market moved to cloud, analytics, mobility. In addition to that, cybersecurity is still also a major buzz. And IBM kind of stayed planted in doing what they historically had done. They were making their way, but not fast or aggressively enough to these new technologies. So as they got behind, their position in the market began to fall or be challenged. And so once that acknowledgement was there, then they had a lot of outstanding assets to begin to catch up, if you will, in cloud and analytics and cybersecurity, mobility. And that was a lot of hard work. And there clearly was a gap whereby they kind of fell out of the top position, if you would, for a period, but then they had rebounded. I'd like to remind everybody, if you might recall, maybe in around the 2012 timeframe, IBM introduced Watson, which was really the first big AI offering into the market. It started with Jeopardy, where IBM's computers were able to beat the Jeopardy king, Ken Jennings, at the time. But then they began to solve serious problems with medical and cancer and things like that by assisting doctors through the use of AI. I think, having the benefit of hindsight, they're probably a little bit too early with regard to that push. There's a lot of new technologies that have developed that would have positioned them a little bit better. So this whole concept of timing, being a little bit late on things, being too early on other things, is always hard to time in the market. But they were able to persevere and get through it. But as that had occurred, there was, the people who would sell analytics were not the people who would sell servers. And so either you had to go through major trainings or actually transition resources out and bring resources in. So there's quite a bit of turmoil, but the company was strong, the balance sheet was strong, and certainly they're in good position moving into the future as we speak today.
What are IBM's primary markets today, Rich?
So it would be software, and under the software category, they are very involved in AI. They still have a 90% market share in the major financial institutions in the world for financial transaction processing. It's the safest and most reliable platform. Kind of the funny thing is, 30 years ago, people would say the mainframe is dead, but having 90% of the financial institution's market share transactionally, 30 years later, they're still kicking. So it would be mainframe computing, it would be software, and it would be, along the lines of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and some of the new technologies that have high growth rates.
That's still a lot of market in the area, I would think.
Yeah, for sure.
Rich, you left IBM. Sorry.
For a period, they weren't growing, but now they're growing quite nicely again.
Glad to see. The oldies are the goodies, as far as I'm concerned. You left IBM in 2016. with an offer to join Tech Data Tech Corporations as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. What did you feel were your key capacities upon joining Tech Data?
Yeah, so maybe this requires a little bit of a story because I think it might be relevant for those who are thinking about their career and developing their career. So I'm at IBM and I'm doing really well, 32 years. From memory, I was 56 years old, and I never thought that I'd leave. I thought that, I when I approached 60 years old, that I would retire and then call it a great career at IBM and be done. So I got this call from the CEO of Tech Data, who was previously an IBMer and who I'd known from the industry very well. And he had called me, said, "Hey, I really would like you to come down and help us to think about our strategy and give us your objective point of view on our strategy." And I said, "I'm happy to do that." So, he said, "Let's meet for dinner the night before, and then you can, the next day we'll go in and we'll go through the strategy." So I got to dinner and, we're having a glass of wine and some appetizers. And he said, "I got to be honest, I really didn't my primary objective was not for you to come down to talk about the strategy. My primary objective was to sit with you eye to eye and ask whether you'd have any interest in joining our company with ultimately transitioning to my job as the CEO." So that was quite shocking. I'd be very candid again with you. On my IBM career path, I knew I wasn't going to be the CEO of IBM. Certainly, I had a lot of experience, but wasn't an engineer deep enough technology-wise to take that mantle. So I found myself in a position where I was offered a role to come in, and if I proved myself to succeed the CEO, and I found that to be pretty exciting. So I started to think about, what skills are important in order for someone to be successful in that particular business. And the good news is, in my IBM time, I understood that business really well. I knew what it took to be successful. I knew that you had to lead a large organization. I knew that you needed to manage a very low margin business. I knew that it was a major and complicated global supply chain. And, there were a couple of other requirements. And when I was offered the opportunity by the individual's name was Bob Dukowski, I said, let me get back to you by the end of the weekend. It was a Friday, and I'll let you know whether I'd have interest or not. And when I went through sort of an evaluation of the skills that would be required to be successful in the role, I say this very humbly, I felt as if I was well positioned and had a lot of those experiences. And when I joined as the COO, I walked through the door day one, and they said, at the time we were $15 billion company. And Bob said to me, he said, "Well, job one is we're going to go buy a business that's $8 billion in sales. So it'll take us from a $15 to $23 billion company. And your job is to go do that acquisition and close that acquisition." So I hit the ground running, but hadn't had a lot of acquisition experience in my past, but I knew this business and I knew most of the competitors in the marketplace as well. So, within a very short period of time, I had the opportunity to lead a $8 billion acquisition. And, within my COO time at Tech Data, was able to get that acquisition closed up and running and very successful for the company, which then gave me the opportunity to become the CEO in the 2-year timeline that he and I had discussed when I had first joined.
What a great assignment to get the company checkbook in hand and be sent to buy out
Yeah.
another company.
Not only that, but then to make it successful. That's the hard
Yes.
part. Mine it is easy, but making it successful, merging two companies is a big challenge.
Rich, how did you tackle adaptation to a totally new organization after 30 years at the same company? I think you've touched on it, but I'd like you to, if you would, to contrast the company culture, if you will, of IBM and then Tech Data.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I would tell you is since the person before me, Bob, also spent many years at IBM, I found the culture to be very similar. You know, people of good character, people that had great moral compasses, people who, cared about the company being successful. So I found, obviously some nuances, but a pretty good alignment. And, I felt comfortable, I won't say from day one, but within 2 months, I felt very comfortable within the culture and had the opportunity then to decide, where we would take the culture ultimately when I became the CEO and how we would advance the culture. So you got to remember that pretty much in the same marketplace of information technology. So the same content of PCs and servers and networking and software and cloud and analytics and security, but just being at a different point within the entirety of that supply chain to the customer. And so the adaptation culturally was okay. We'll maybe get into it a little bit later because I know we'll talk about the merger ultimately of Tech Data and SYNNEX, now TD-SYNNEX, and we'll talk about more of the cultural challenges of acquisitions and mergers. That's a different kettle of fish.
I think we'll certainly look forward to hearing from that. And that's kind of touching on the evolution. Tech Data, which is now TD-SYNNEX, describes itself as a leading distributor and solutions aggregator of the information technology ecosystem. Now, I'm a layman. That was quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
Can you provide us with a bit more of an explanation as to the meaning of that description?
Yeah, sure can. We'll keep it simple. So from a IT vendor perspective, you have IBM, you have Cisco, you've got HP, you've got NetApp. Go on down the list. Just about every large name in tech has a go-to-market model that has two channels to it. The first is they have their sales force and they serve their largest and most strategic customers. Their sales resources address that. But, there's millions of dentists, doctors, restaurants, accountants, electricians, plumbers. You can go down the list that aren't served directly by Microsoft and HP and back to the list that I had mentioned earlier. So what they do is they turn to what is known as the business partner ecosystem to serve those millions of customers. And so within the business partner ecosystem, there really are two primary participants. There are the solution providers who deliver the end solution to the plumber, the accountant, on and on and on. And then there's the distributor who serve and help to bring all of the offerings from the vendors into these solution providers. So globally, TD-SYNNEX has over 150,000 customers like that who ultimately serve the dentist, the doctor, the electrician, etc. And so at least half of all of IT goes through this business partner ecosystem. And so we, as the distributor, provide the training, the enablement, the financing, on down the list for all of those solution providers to enable solutions that they sell to the end user. So just to keep this in context, this fiscal year we closed at $60 billion in sales. So every working day we ship $250 million of product, we TD-SYNNEX, to these people. And the average order size is $2,000. So, you're talking about transactions, millions at scale of transactions happening constantly and continuously, which, just makes it a great business. And It's a vital part of the entire IT sort of ecosystem that ultimately serves smaller customers. Hopefully that made sense.
It does to me, and it's well explained. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Rich, what are the significant shifts in the way that IT products have been brought to the market, and how TD-SYNNEX, what was their role in bringing these new products to the market?
Yeah, so you get back to, physical hardware, we'll use that as an example, being delivered to customers, and that still goes on today, and it's a big part of the business. However, a lot of what happens today is in, what you might call the virtual world or cloud. So you can buy a server in the cloud, you can buy software as a service in the cloud. So although we see these transitions happening, our role in servicing Microsoft, IBM, HP, Cisco is the same, as are the solution providers. So we have now very large platforms that deliver billions of dollars of sales every year that are done virtually through the cloud or through software as a service, on and on and on. So the model has shifted whereby it's just not pick, pack, ship physical devices, but you have all of these virtual offerings being sold too. So that's how the market has transitioned. And again, the one thing that holds true under the circumstance over the last 40 years is you still need groups to service those millions of customers who really don't have a lot of IT proficiency, and they rely upon those solution providers and the distribution chain to provide that competency and knowledge as to, what IT solutions might be right for them.
It's a lot of moving parts there. What would you describe as the two different types of positions within the company that are critical to take Data's daily business operation?
Yeah.
And by this, I mean the job titles, responsibilities, skills, and capabilities required.
Yeah, as you know, within a company, it takes a village. So everybody participates, and you can't run the business without HR or, on down the list. But if I were to tell you the sort of the vital roles based on the IT aggregator model, I'll give you three. The first one is the CFO. And the CFO is critical because the business is low margin, and we're dealing with millions of transactions, and you have to have processes, systems, have the ability to deploy capital where you're going to get good returns, things of that nature. So the CFO is important. Not only the global CFO, but the regional CFO, then the country CFO. They all play a critical part. And they serve as a business partner to the second role that I'm about to talk about, and that is the general manager of the country or the region. These are the folks who understand the strategy, get behind the strategy, invest in the strategy, deploy the strategy, and then ultimately have to execute the sales on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And the third role that I would talk about is the supply chain. So, remember that on an annualized basis in the rounding, we're probably moving $50 billion of product around the world, full scale, just about every country in the world, and being able to make sure that the right product is in the right place at the right time so that you can meet 2-day service level agreements, takes a lot of really, really great work. And I think we've seen the importance of the supply chain when we came through COVID, when it didn't work so well across every industry, and what had transpired there. So, those would be the three roles that I would hold up as, really important roles to get right if you're going to be in an IT distribution and or aggregator business.
Well, particularly such a successful one as the one that you ran.
Yeah.
Jim, back to you.
Thanks, Bruce. And Rich, thanks for the responses you gave to Bruce's questions. It really helped me, and I'm sure our SigTalk audience understand a little better the nature of the business that you've been so connected with and leading for the past 8 years. So, and by the way, as a former HR executive, I really have to say I appreciate Bob's tactic in bringing you to dinner and recruiting you that way.
Yeah.
He lured you in for sure, but I'm glad you made the decision that you did. 2 years after joining Tech Data, you were promoted to become the chief executive officer. With at the risk of being a little immodest, what led to your being elevated to that level so quickly after joining the company? What did you accomplish that got you there?
Yeah, I think that Bob and the board at the time when I came in as the COO, again, there was an expected transition if I did everything properly that I would become the CEO. We're evaluating me on a couple of things. The first was business results, that being really important. The second is how I fit in to the culture and, whether I was respected as a leader. Certainly, if you're going to name someone into the CEO role, you have to have the respect of the people. And then the third is, my ability to work with the different primary stakeholders of the business. I talked about the people, which they're big stakeholders, obviously. Then the financial markets would be another big stakeholders, our owners, and then our customers, as well as our vendors. And I talk about Cisco or HP or Dell, they're vendors, and then our customers are the solution providers, and having their respect. So I think that, again, it's results, it's respect of the shareholders, and then was I culturally fitting in at Tech Data? And when I first had come in, we had agreed to a 2-year timeline, and that's what we executed against. And almost to a day, it was 2 years from when I had started to when I had become the CEO.
Well, it sounds like the decision to elevate you made a lot of sense, and I think the next 6 years after that proved that it was a good decision on the part of the board. I'm going to jump to something you mentioned earlier, which was the merger of TD with SYNNEX. Now, just a little bit of comment. You guided the company through a period of dynamic growth leading to its acquisition by investment firm Apollo Global Management in 2020. In turn, Apollo merged Tech Data with SYNNEX Corporation in 2021 for a cool $7.2 billion. Now, you were very involved with all those changes and leading them. And, you have been quoted as saying that you think that was certainly the biggest thing you did within your career. So tell us a little bit about the TD-SYNNEX merger. What was the rationale for it? And you also commented earlier that bringing two companies together like that, had its unique set of challenges, especially when it came to the culture of the company.
Yeah, so this bears a bit of a longer explanation, so I appreciate it if you bear with me here. So, we're just finished that first merger that I told you about, the $8 billion company. We're like, oh, thank goodness, we've got that done. And, we got a knock on the door from Apollo, and they said, hey, we would like to acquire you because we think that you're undervalued. And, the thought was, oh my goodness, we just finished this merger and here we go again. So Apollo had carried out an extensive evaluation of our company. And I'm going to go from memory here, might not get it precisely right, but I think they offered $125 per share. And so we went to the board and said, hey, we've got a buyer. And I think we were trading in around 100 at that time. And went to the board and we said, we think we should pursue this deal because it's the right thing to do for our shareholders. So then we announced the deal, and within a deal for a public company, there's always something called a ghost shop period where, there's a for sale sign put up to see if anyone wants to provide a better offer. And I remember talking to our legal counsel. I said, and I was the CEO at the time. I said, come on, what are the chances here? We should just get on with this. And lo and behold, this is in the public domain, so don't mind sharing it. We got a call from Berkshire Hathaway, and they said, we'd like to meet with the CEO, and we want to have a very brief meeting. So I had opportunity to meet with Berkshire. And after that conversation with a very senior person at Berkshire, can't get into the names, they looked me in the eye and they said, here's the deal. Tomorrow at noon or before noon, you're going to get a superior offer from us. And we want to be very clear that every term of the offer will be equal to or better than what you have. And we want to be very clear that we're a one and done, so there's no negotiation after. So they came in with a 140 offer. So we're trading at 100, Apollo's at 125, they came in at 140. And then Apollo, by contract, had the opportunity to respond within a 48-hour period. And they came back, I think, at 145. And so I tell you that long story because the experiences that one gains by going through a process like that are just extraordinary. And I continue to tell people all of the time, I wish I had gone through that 10 years younger, because I think my opportunity to do greater things would have been there. But then we closed. We announced our intent to close in November. And so you have to get all the government approvals. We all know this, like with the US now, the SEC has to approve, but every government where we're participating. And so it's November, and then COVID comes in February. And we say, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? And Apollo assured us, hey, we're going to pursue this deal and get it closed. And ultimately we did close it in July. So we closed it in July. And for those who might know private equity, I was told by a consulting firm that the exit strategy begins the day the deal closes. So, Apollo was an outstanding experience, outstanding partner, but, we had decided to pursue a discussion with SYNNEX in early November. And they said, we're busy right now, but come back the day after Christmas. So you got to remember, we closed with Apollo and we were up and running as a private company in July. And then we met with SYNNEX right after Christmas and then announced the deal ultimately with them in March of 21. So Apollo actually was the official owner. We were private for 14 months. And they bought us, I believe, for 3.7. And as you said, they sold for 7.2 or 7.3. I forget your number was. But so you can see how the value of the company expanded, over a very short period of time. The benefit of TD-SYNNEX coming together, I'm going to put this in sort of football terms for those who, follow college football. This merger was like Michigan and Ohio State merging. Right? We were fierce competitors in the market. So, I had agreed and was happy to carry on as the CEO of TD-SYNNEX. It took us from both in the rounding a $30 billion footprint to now a $60 billion footprint. The business doubled in size, but the challenge from where my seat was this was two very different cultures. Not in terms of, morals and character or any of those things. It was how to run and manage and execute the business. And everyone, wants to do things the way they historically had, and they think it's the best way to do it. So we knew that the cultural journey would be 3 years plus, and, inevitably there was a lot of tension early on. And, got to remember, we did this merger during COVID, so people weren't physically even being able to come together. But fortunately, we had a successful roadmap, and the company's really quite successful right now. And so, but for those who, are in business and are involved with business combinations of mergers and acquisitions, the textbook says it, and it's 100% true. In the end, culture eats strategy for lunch. And in the end, it's getting people to sort of come together and respect one another enough where you can sit down and have a dialogue of, is it A, B, or C, the direction that we might pursue on a given, process or activity. A being one company, B being the other, and C being something new. So those are stressful periods. I think the heart and the mind grow stronger when you come through those successful or those challenging periods. I've always said that the best learning moments of my life were when you're under the most dire of circumstances. It's like somebody's got you in the corner and they're throttling you by the neck. And then when you would do anything when you're in the middle of it to get out from under it. But when you're 6 months or a year removed, you say, oh my God, I had learned so much. And that has become such a foundation of my entire experience portfolio. And so, I would just say to those out there that might be working now and passionate about what they're doing and in stressful moments, that's when you grow. Ginny Rometty, the CEO of IBM, she's now retired. She had a saying, and I think that the saying is very relevant. She said, growth and comfort cannot coexist or do not coexist. And I think that's largely true as it relates to one developing, their career and what it is they want to accomplish. If it weren't challenging, everybody would do it, right?
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And I fully appreciate what you're talking about. Sometimes when you're going through those circumstances, you wonder if you'll come out alive. And then when it's all over, you realize just how valuable it was to you and how much you developed from it.
Well said.
And, it sounds like there could be a good book written about what you just described. Maybe that's a good retirement activity for you. But look, we're running a little tight on time, so I'm going to skip the question about the stock price and turn it back over to Bruce to take his second tranche of questions for you.
Thank you, Jim. Let's switch from the dollars and cents to the real kernels of leadership. As you know, that one of our mission in Sigma Chi is to be a premier leadership training organization, and we do pretty well. We start with some pretty good raw material, but the Sigma Chi experience, in addition to, of course, enjoying your 4 years as an undergraduate, is supposed to stand for something that gives our people a real leg up on careers. And those of us that serve as officers, as consul or proconsul, learn how to do leadership stuff. I'd like to hear from you, Rich, because from what I understand, you're an executive who cares deeply about the people and the work environment of your organization. We talked about business culture before. How would you contrast the business culture of Tech Data when you first arrived? And in what ways did you go about reinforcing and or seeking to add additional value to that environment?
That's a great question. So when I reflected back on all my time, I was trying to, determine what would be the tagline for the type of leadership that, I aspired to. We had landed on this term, which is an industry term called servant leadership. And servant leadership is quite simple in its base form. It's simply described, but it's challenging for some to do. And first thought that comes to me around servant leadership is treat others the way you would want to be treated. The second tagline that comes to me around servant leadership is that management is in service to the people in their organization. I kind of think about a player-coach analogy. A coach, takes on a team, pick your favorite team, it doesn't matter, pick your favorite sport. The coach, chooses who's going to be on the team. The coach then, trains, practices, game plans, sets strategy, rehearses. Then they go and they play the game. They play the game, and then there's some good things that occur, and then there's some things that can be improved upon. The coach steps back and on an individual basis kind of sits down in a very positive sort of setting to say, take a look at this handoff, or take a look at this pass, or take a look at whatever, and this is what we can do better. And the coaching element of servant leadership is essential in the context of really working on and authentically being committed to helping the teammates be successful, prosper, and strive as to what it is they're pursuing. Oftentimes it's referred to as leading from behind, but it is to put at the forefront the people and make sure that you're doing everything you can to make them successful.
Well, you probably know that servant leadership is a philosophy that is very strong within our Sigma Chi educational experience. This philosophy has been taught to hundreds of Sigma Chi undergraduates at our annual CROC transformational leadership workshops, named for and sponsored by our past Grand Consul Keith Kroc, who, in addition to being a transformational leadership person and a servant leader, is also very successful in the first Trump administration as the Deputy Secretary of State, who really first brought into the public eye the, shall we say, the concern of the competition with China. How you've defined servant leadership in your own way. How did you actually deploy it while you were at TD-SYNNEX?
So, I think that through my IBM days, that was sort of my chemistry and how I had responded. So we went through a very large educational series around servant leadership. We set expectations as to what we expected from leaders. And then, we lived it from the top on down through the rest of the organization. And certainly there are folks who weren't aligned, and ultimately they left the company. But it was interesting because when we first started servant leadership, I had some folks in Europe saying, I'm not sure if we're bought in. And then when we merged, these same people were coming to me saying, we have to maintain servant leadership. So, I think it's a matter of educating, getting the entire organization lined up, and then the culture becomes accustomed to that management style and really, really enjoys it and endorses it.
Well, it certainly shows in the accomplishment of your career. I will say, as a student and performer, and now I have an academic credential as a ritual master, that whole philosophy is actually enshrined in one of the major obligations that we take when we're initiated, that when we promise to help our individual brothers and the organization itself prosper. And you certainly seem to have been able to manage that.
And it has to be authentic, because if it's not, people will read right through it, and rightfully so. So you have to be authentic when you're committing to be in service to those folks,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jim, back to you, sir.
I think you're on mute. Jim, you're on mute.
Thank you for that. I do want to just get a quick comment from you about your board membership at Allstate. Now, so here you are there at a company that's so different from what you do there at TD-SYNNEX. So how is it that a person like yourself can contribute to the board and the leadership of a company like Allstate in the role that you've played there?
Yeah, so very quickly, when a board assesses the type of members they want, or the additions that they want, they quickly go through a skills matrix to see where the deficiencies might be as the industry changes. And so Allstate had a need for someone who had IT awareness and experience. And in addition to that, I had gone through multiple transformations and had a reasonable business and financial acumen. So I had fit that mold, and they had asked me to, or invited me to join that board. And I was really excited about it because 42 years within tech, being able to understand another business model and gain those experiences were important. So it's sort of like a double handshake where they have an expectation of me helping in these areas that they need help in as a board, and then me having the opportunity to learn a new business. And just to put it in perspective, I'm likely going to be on a plane here in the next couple of days out to Los Angeles with the wildfires, on the ground with the Allstate team there. So I'm a more informed and experienced board member as we come through it. So, companies like the Allstates of the world and all of their competitors, they have a very, very critical role in challenging times like they're facing right now in LA.
Yeah, what a great opportunity for you to continue your own learning and also make a contribution simultaneously, as you were saying. You're also strongly committed to giving back in your local and state communities. Anybody who looks at your background is going to find out that you've placed high value in participating in organizations such as CEOs Against Cancer, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, and Feeding Tampa Bay, just to name a few. Tell us a little bit about, what is it about you in terms of placing a high value on that kind of participation?
Well, we all run into challenges and tragedies in our life, and they sort of help define where it is you think you can contribute outside of the workplace. And certainly cancer was an area for me that resonated. And I've always been focused on kids and the welfare of kids. And that led me to Feeding Tampa Bay, because we learned about all of these undernourished kids who are trying to, go to school and have the opportunity to develop and learn. And when you're undernourished, your opportunity of doing that is greatly diminished. So, it's things like that that inspire my philanthropic sort of areas and focus. And that's, I think we all have the responsibility of paying it forward and giving back. And, I try not to spread myself too thin, and while staying a bit narrow, I feel as if I can contribute a lot more.
Well, I think from your leadership perch, you have a great opportunity to make a difference in those areas, and that's appreciated. And it just makes us proud as Sigma Chi's to know that you're doing that. So you're retired now. You made some comments earlier, which kind of lead me to think that your decision about retirement was a very conscious one. At a certain point in your life and your career. So you're going to still be busy, of course, with the board work and the work you're doing in the philanthropic area. But what kind of things are you going to be doing on the leisure side, that you well deserve after all these years of hard work?
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, and I want to just offer one other thought too. So first, I got an extra hour of sleep every day. Second, I've doubled my time working out. Third, I'm an aspiring golfer, so I stay after that. And then fourth, 6 grandkids. So, trying to re-engage in the family and in a more holistic way. And those are where I'm focused. But the one thing that I wanted to pass on to the audience with my parting statement is, we all need to realize that we've got one trip in life. And it's really important when you're thinking about your career that you enjoy what you're doing. Sadly, 50% of employment, people do not enjoy what they're doing. And, if I think about myself, if I worked 42 years unhappy, that's just too big a part of anyone's life to not be happy. So please, for everyone out there, enjoy your one trip in life. And if you're not enjoying it, then change something.
Well, those are great words, and thank you for that summary statement. I really enjoyed listening to what you had to say tonight, and I'm sure our audience did as well. I hope to see you again at the Alpha Chi Golf Classic, where you can exercise your golf game a little further. We'll be doing that again in June. Let me just ask James Hefner, our producer, if we have any questions that we can take for Rich. Did anything come in?
It says no questions.
All right. Well, you certainly covered things very thoroughly for us, Rich, and it was really a great experience for Bruce and I to be able to co-moderate a discussion with you. And if we could just ask you, Rich, to stay on after we sign off here. We just like to chat with you for a minute or two before we close out. For our audience, thank you again. We'll be back in February. We don't have a designated speaker at this time, but we surely will have one. And please tell your friends that they can tune in to the Sigma Chi Learning Consortium past events within a couple of days. This interview will be posted there, a recording of it, so that if you'd like to re-listen to it, because Rich had a lot of great things to cover with us. So let me say good night to our Sigma Chi audience, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.